Awesome. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody joining from various parts of the world. And a very warm welcome to everyone and our speakers on board. As you can see, we are going to speak on transforming digital fan experience in sports through augmented reality. This topic is kind of very relevant for the times that we are living in, and I'm really excited to kind of be a moderator for this show. My name is Venu, and I'm based out of Toronto, Canada. And as you can see that we have a lot of Canadians in the house today. So really excited about this. I'll just start off with a brief introduction of all the speakers, and then we'll move on to the panel discussion. So first up, we have Costa Clariano. He's a senior innovation and technology leader, and he is also having his own initiative called sportstechbusiness.com. So welcome, Costa. Welcome on board.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Awesome. Brilliant to have you on board. Next, we have Scott Kegley joining us from Minnesota, and he's the executive director and digital media and innovation for Minnesota Vikings Football Club. So lovely to have you here, Scott.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, guys.
Awesome. And we have Tom Embridge, Canadian, but he's in the West Coast right now. I know it's too early for you in the morning, so thanks for joining in, Tom. Awesome to have you here.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Tom is, into AR, and he's a wearables pioneer as well, and he's a VP at 8Wall. So lovely to have you on board.
Good to be here.
Then we have Dr. Sherry Bradish, and she's a Loretta Rogers Research Chair in Sports Marketing at Ryerson University here in Toronto. So lovely having you here, Sherry.
Thank you.
Awesome. And we have Satish and Arvind. Satish, hi. Arvind, hi. They are from Fanisco. Satish is the CEO, and Arvind is the Chief of Business Development. Welcome on board once again.
Thanks, Venu. Good to be on the panel with everybody.
Awesome.
Thanks, Venu. Excited for this one. This is very close to our hearts, especially at this time. We have great panel. We will have plenty of healthy discussions here. So pretty excited to be here.
Awesome. Looking forward to this. Cool. So just a few housekeeping rules before we proceed to the panel discussion. We have a Q&A segment here on Zoom. So you can type in your questions for the panel as an audience, and we will actually get in your questions as well in between whenever we can. And we also are running a few polls, so please do participate in those polls. And after the webinar is done, we'll be just sending you a very short survey with 4 questions. So it'll be great if you could send in responses to that as well. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and we will get onto the video mode. So we have a few questions prepared for the panelists. The first question is for Dr. Sherry and Costa. So ladies first, maybe I'll start with Sherry first.
Perfect.
How can AR enhance the sports fans' experience? A generic question, but a good one to start off with.
Exactly. And I think you know that for some of these, I'll answer more broadly, and I'll give some specific examples, as I'm sure the others will. So to start off, I think we know right now that AR and VR will really provide a lot of opportunities for fans and fan engagement, in particular now that we know that the fan who's been so central to the sport product has been displaced. So using those technologies and really working with designers in creative ways that I would say spectators can feel they're part of the action, part of the game, in particular with the COVID-19 pause, really enables sport properties to bring to life that stadium experience, whether it be particular athlete engagements and athlete activations type of work, or really bringing that stadium experience to life through allowing those fans to cheer for their teams in new ways. So I would suggest really off the top that there's a multitude of ways, and I know we'll layer it around partners and strategy, that we can really think about bringing AR into the fan experience.
Interesting. Awesome. Costa, over to you.
And I think Sherry touched on some great points there. And just to add to that, I think it's a way to find new fans. I'll look at somebody like NASCAR. I know a lot of people have gotten into NASCAR through their virtual reality platform, through Oculus. It brings that experience to them, and then it creates a fan of the sport. Because I mean, we all see the sports on TV and through the regular 2D or even 3D dimensions, and we respect what the athletes do. But until you are across the court and taking a serve from Bianca Andreescu, or you're in NASCAR and you're driving around, you don't understand the speed and what it actually, the skill level. And then you get another appreciation for what the sport can bring to you. And it makes you that bigger fan, and it creates new fans. It hits new demographics. And that's what really all sports are looking for. They're trying to compete against not only other sports, but esports, live entertainment, computer games. So it's just a way to get out and reach those new fans and bring them in, because you look at a lot of sports and the demo is getting older. So it's how can we use a different activation to bring new fans in and just keep that pipeline going. And I think it's a very effective way of doing it.
Absolutely agree. I mean, yeah, no better way to put it across like you did. Yep. Awesome. Yep. The second question is directed towards Scott, Sherry again, and Arvind. So maybe I'll start with Scott first. How can AR be used to enhance the value or ROI that sponsors get out of their investment with the sports organizations? So very relevant for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, one of the ways that sponsors can really be involved, and, this applies to AR, but it applies to a lot of different, content or activations that we might have. And I think that first comes from understanding what the partner's goals are, right? And what their brand story is, what their brand message is, and then ultimately how we use any of the pieces of content that we have, whether it's social media or digital media content, production, whether that's events, or AR. I think that kind of the same holds true, right? So when we, last year worked with Pepsi, we're going to be working with them again this year on our activation. But a lot of their goals was really, and their marketing campaign was all about celebrations and celebrating, some of these special moments with the team. And so we actually brought to life and had our players do some green screen animations of some of their touchdown celebrations or sack celebrations. And we created a game that was part of our Pepsi concessions cups, where fans could then see these, they'd play a quick offensive or defensive game, and then ultimately be able to celebrate or mimic the celebrations of some of their favorite athletes, and then see themselves up on the Jumbotron, and then they'd have a video that they were able to share on social. But really the concept, we could kind of go a lot of different ways with the concept, and it was something that we were thinking about the cup. But when you start talking about what our goals are as an organization, what Pepsi's goals are from their side, and how we kind of meet in the middle and create a really innovative concept within that, I think that speaks to something that's really in with any partnership is it a win for the brand? Right? Mm-hmm. Is it a win for the team? What's Pepsi kind of bringing to this to enhance that? And then ultimately, is it a win for the fans? And we created a piece of content really that was driven off of a simple concessions cup. So I think it hit in those three areas for us.
Interesting. So from a change management perspective, did it take a while for fans to adapt to this, or was it kind of a gradual process, or how was it?
The AR activation was done through the Vikings mobile app, and there's a call out on the concessions cup, at the point of sales, and so I think it was successful, for the first year working with the partner in Pepsi. One thing that we really want to grow is how we take that out of and part of it also due to COVID, but we were thinking about this long beforehand, is really how we grow that activation beyond the stadium. The app's a really important part of the stadium for us in terms of getting everybody to use it for digital ticketing or wayfinding, a lot of different utility initiatives within the building. And so to drive people there for us was successful. But now we want to take that and have some activations within the stadium, some activations at other partners areas, and then some AR that just lives persistent within the app through the entire season.
Interesting. Lovely. Arvind, you want to come in?
Sure thing. Yeah. I mean, see, the traditional methods of promoting sponsors, right? They do not work anymore, and during this time, right, it's even more prevalent. So if a sports organization is still thinking about logo slapping or billboards promotions, right, then they're probably sitting at the lowest point as far as the digital maturity curve is concerned. Again, you won't be able to measure ROI thoroughly as well, right? Emerging tech like AR or VR, right? So they offer real-time measures, and they also like provide that instant feedback, right, directly from the fans. So the digital audiences, they love immersive experiences, and they want their experiences to be gamified, right? The art of storytelling that Scott was talking about, right, and through visual medium will clearly like improve the engagement and retention rates, right? And they are extremely high with any immersive or interactive experiences. So naturally, there is a more brand exposure that the sponsor brands will get from those kind of repeat audiences, right? And even the digital audiences, they tend to remember the brands and their message extremely well, right? If it is told in more of a visual medium, right, and it's kind of immersive. So if a sports organization does all these things, right, in a better way, then the sponsors also get excited, right? They want in, right? They want to work with them, and this sort of creates that new monetization opportunities that the sports brands are looking for. Again, the drive should come from both parties, right? Both the sports organizations and also the sponsor brands, because that's when a lot of the activations that you see, right? It becomes viral, right? There is more footfalls and all this kind of stuff. And again, Vikings are doing exceptionally well on that front.
Interesting. Yep, absolutely. Sherry, you want to come in?
I'll just quickly add, because I think we'll get into this to other pieces, that from the business of sport perspective, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday on the pre-call, without a doubt, the fans are being displaced in a way we have not seen in the modern area of professional sport since it's evolved. And so I underpin that as more of a take two steps back and say how fundamentally important these authentic fan engagement and well executed tools and technologies can be, because we know the numbers they're not consistent about fan engagement and re-engagement. And so to the other points, I just want to underscore how fundamentally important technology will be in bringing those fans and keeping them engaged and those eyeballs. And so that's why I underscore the importance of this topic in general, is just looking at some other just general trends in sport business, why it's so important.
Manu, if I can just add as well, like one of the things to really underscore is the fact that we're talking about reality technologies. And so this is a very critical point to make. It seems obvious, but we shouldn't dismiss it. We're adding a whole new layer of reality on top of our existing reality, which in Scott's case, you know, gives a new reason to buy that Pepsi, right? So you've now given the fan a new reason to buy the Pepsi. You give the fan a new reason to increase the dwell time with that product, because the product does more than just facilitates the drink. And therefore, you know, dwell time, engagement, as Arvind mentioned, recall, like these are some of the major wins that augmented reality can bring to the table. Again, because you're taking everyday things that we've, you know, grown up with and take for granted, and brought with it a brand new life because it's a reality technology.
Very well said, Tom. I absolutely agree with you. Yep. In fact, on the same note, you know, while we were speaking, there's a couple of interesting audience questions from Will. I'll probably combine the two questions because they're kind of similar. With no fans or reduced fans in stadiums this season, you know, how can AR bring value and impressions to those in-stadium game day sponsors that rely on capacity crowds for impression? The second part is they typically rely on ribbons and logo placement throughout the stadiums, and sponsored game day AR experiences can help. Have you had any experiences or ideas for this specific topic? Maybe I'll start with Satish on this from a technology standpoint.
Yeah, that's a good, actually a good question, right? Because majority of the sponsorships in sports is game day, right? And also the game day broadcast, right? That's the prominent or you know, highly visible sponsorship that has been we have seen, at least in this area, right? But I think post-COVID, it might change because like with no fans and all, I was just reading in the NBA bubble how, you know, like they had a live tour for the journalist yesterday, and it was a good article where they were saying a lot of things about what NBA is bringing in technology and you know, like the fanless experience, right? So they're trying to kind of innovate on that. So obviously, you know, providing content, game day content in a different way through AR, right? You can have small clip snippets of game day great moments, right? Like, you know, touchdown moments or three-pointer moments, or, you know, one of the home run moments and all, which can be captured in 360-degree video, which fans can experience it through a portal experience, or even fans can. How do you broadcast fan celebrations, right? That they might be sitting in their couch on the TV or in with the family and friends or with the kids. How do you capture the celebratory moments and stream it back to the stadium or to the live broadcast? These are some creative ideas where sponsors would be interested in because it gives more eyeballs and more immersive experiences that fans wouldn't forget that. So I'm guessing it's going to post-COVID, you're going to see more innovations on that angle, both from broadcaster side, the team side, even the sponsors are going to come up with some ideas and asking the teams to implement it. So it's going to be pretty exciting to see.
Interesting. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, Will. Thank you for your question. We'll move to the next one here, and then we'll come back to the audience questions again. So this is for Costa, Scott, and Tom, and maybe we'll start with Costa for this one. AR has penetrated into several sectors like retail, healthcare, real estate, but has yet to become a mainstream in the sports industry. Why is it so?
I think I would challenge that. I don't think it's become mainstream in the other industries yet. I think it has a huge amount of applications, especially in the healthcare sector, as we've seen, and it'll probably become more mainstream there and in the other industries first, just because of the money involved. There's an untold number of billions in the other industries compared to sports. I mean, sports does provide a lot of revenue, but it can't compare with some of these other behemoths. But I think it will find its way into sports just because it's the next evolution. And I know we talk a lot about how can we add value when the fans aren't there, but that's temporary in the grand scheme of things. That's a few months, maybe a year, hopefully not longer than that, but it is temporary. And teams and organizations really need to start looking, if they haven't already, past the the no fans, the no fans issue, because if you're planning for no fans right now, it's already too late. Especially if you're looking in the AR space. I mean, I know Fox is doing virtual fans in the stands for baseball. So and then some of the virtual signage, there's some little things you can do, but if you're talking large scale VR, AR activations, you want to look long-term. And that involves a lot of capital. And another reason is in the healthcare industries, again, I'll just use that as an example, you can plan for 5 years down the road. In sports, you're planning a year ahead, if you're lucky. So that's why it's also it's a little bit of a different scale to bring things up in the sports industry. But I think it will become mainstream in those other industries a little earlier for the reasons I mentioned, and then sports eventually, just because it's the next evolution in fan engagement. And it goes back to, you can only sell so many tickets and put so many signs on the field before you got to figure out some new revenue and fan engagement methods.
Interesting. Tom, what's your experience being from a separate industry altogether?
I do agree with Costa. Like when I read this question, I felt the same. Just I wanted to challenge it as well, mainly because I'd argue that the sports industry has been quite active with AR and fan engagement across a number of fan touch points, from broadcast to in-stadium to social AR to web AR to native applications, both at stadium and in-home. When I read the question, I felt like perhaps we feel like retail, healthcare, and real estate are more active, perhaps because they have a select few use cases that are consistent within that industry vertical that that we become very clear about and therefore very aware of. But more importantly, retail, healthcare, and real estate have been doing a really good job of sharing their stories around the success that they've had with AR. And so the industries that have that ability to share metrics and benchmarks and best practices start to shine a light on how effective AR can be in moving the needle on ROI. And I think that's where the sports and entertainment industry could really come together to do the same. When I was looking back at what we've seen within the AR space, broadcast immersive video is a form of augmented reality. And of course, the sports industry has been using that for a number of years, and now it's trickling into, news, weather, live events like recently the MTV Music Awards. At 8th Ball, we did a web AR enabled campaign that was triggered. It was an image target that was triggered off of a broadcast of the Philadelphia Phillies game. This was in partnership with NBC Sports Philadelphia and Agency Blue. And essentially the viewer at home was able to scan a QR code, and they were given access to a virtual bobblehead of Aaron Nola, which they could interact with. This experience was trying to like bridge that gap between the physical and the digital to engage the viewer at home in a new way, but it also had a very tangible outcome. It was all geared towards driving ticket sales for an upcoming game. So a very clear call to action. You know, social AR as well as something that I think we need to talk about here on the call. You know, Snapchat and Instagram and Facebook filters are a place that we've seen sports fan engagement opportunities, from team face paints, you know, brought to you by Bud Light, all the way through to scanning like an NFL 100 logo to commemorate the 100-year mark of the NFL, and even going out of home to scan murals of the LA Clippers, you know, to bring those to life. So, you know, I have like an entire list that I could probably talk for a complete hour on like what's happening in sports. So I don't want folks on this webinar to think that there's not activity within the sports space. I think there's just a myriad of trials, tests, and opportunities that are being used. And I think, as Costa pointed out, they could be quite temporal as well, right? And so, whereas like in retail, you have this commitment to roll out, you know, 3D and AR as part of the virtual try-on or the tryout experience. You know, we may have yet to see what the consistent use cases are within sports and entertainment that that fans can continue to expect from every league, every team, every sponsor.
Correct. On that note, you know what, Scott, I'll ask you this question in two parts. One is, do you agree with these two gentlemen in terms of the perception in that question? Second is, you know, the next question was pretty much in line with, you know, what they were speaking with regards to sports. So do you feel that COVID-19 will fast track AR as this mainstream into sports? So that's the second part of the question.
Yeah, well, first, I mean, Tom really well said. You know, I agree completely. I think that there's a lot of teams that are trying this out, right? And there's a lot of different applications and different ways that you can look at it. I think, you know, speaking from my experience and maybe going back like 3 years to when we first started AR, right? Like it's not cheap. You know, it's difficult to integrate within like an SDK. It's become easier and easier, and SDKs have gotten smaller and smaller and gone cloud-based and some things like that, where it's not, you know, increasing the size of your app like it was, you know, maybe several years ago. And again, like this is coming from our perspective, where we have everything you know, baked within the app, and kind of some of the initiatives that we've had around the app. Not saying that there's not a bunch of different ways to do it. But I think that when you look at that, you know, a lot of teams, you know, on the sports side, when you start it that very first time, they're going to say, what's your plan to monetize it? And then what do you tell a partner, right? Like, what are the expectations that you have for this to do? Like, you know, how is this going to perform? What return are you going to give Pepsi? I mean, Pepsi for us, I mean, this happened last year, but the 2 years before that, you know, we had to set it up as, hey, this is a test, right? Like, I mean, we understand that this is a space that we have to be in. We understand that we're not going to make money on this in year 1 or 2, but the value that we gain in the data and the way that we're going to package that over these next 2 years, so that year 3, we're going to be where we need to be to hit on that from a team side and a brand side and a fan side, and make it relevant to all three of those different groups. So yes, I totally agree with Costa and Tom on the point. But, you know, for sports teams, that is a challenge, and that's not a challenge from an AR side. That's really a challenge from like a business side, and how you choose to you know, adapt or react to new technologies and take that leap. And you know, the analogy I would use is like, you know, how you want to be tip of the spear with these types of technologies, and you know, in order to try some of these things. The thing that I think is amazing about sports, you know, maybe compared to a lot of other different verticals, you know, maybe you know, some people disagree, you know, because this is where I've spent my entire career, right? But like, you know, I think the interesting thing about sports is, you know, the passion of the fans, the way that they're invested in the team, and it prevents, or it creates, I should say, it creates an opportunity to use stadiums, to use mobile apps as this petri dish for technology, and to see what sticks and what works, and to constantly innovate and try. I mean, sports teams might be, you know, slow to adapt because of some of these things, but they really have the best environment to test out some of these new technologies. And I completely forget about COVID.
Yeah.
Just to touch on that, you know, as well, I think potentially for us, it's just, you know, and as I mentioned earlier, a lot of what we had done, you know, last year in 2019 was based more around the stadium. We'd already been talking about wanting to expand beyond the stadium. So I don't think that necessarily has to do just with COVID, but some of the activations, you know, and ways that you can bring fans back into the game day experience. The one thing that we found through surveys with our fans is fans really want it to feel as normal as possible this year. So if they're used to having, you know, an impact on the game when they're at the stadium, they still want to feel like they do, even though this is a completely unique year. So how can we use some of those experiences to do that? But I agree, and I think Costa said this. But if you're just planning to do AR now because of COVID, you know, it's going to be difficult. There's a lot of work that needs to be done between, well, for us now in a month or so before our season starts.
I think it'll be a more reactive gesture or reactive, you know, way or strategy for the teams instead of proactiveness, right? Yeah.
I would add, I know this isn't my question, but I would just add on that piece that what we've been tracking and know from our mentors and advisors, that perhaps the wording just in terms of the question is COVID fast tracking HR, VR, sorry, and AR.
Yeah.
What we know without a doubt is within the corporate structure, they're very open to new innovations right now. So I don't know if we can track the fast tracking, but if we look at media partners or traditional corporate partners, they're very open to say, what can we try? And so I go back to Costa's appreciation. There's got to be a strategy and an appropriate timeline attached to it. But we know for a fact in doing some just longitudinal adoption of innovation, we're terming it's a very open market in this pandemic for new innovations.
And at the same point and you look at that, there is that willingness, but it's such a tightrope because there's no money coming in. Like, let's be real. There's no money coming into any major sport. And what there is just, we're trying to salvage something right now. So it's really making the senior leadership understand, okay, this is not a cost center. This is not a nice to have. What we're bringing in has an ROI. If I'm spending $1, I'm getting $10 and not even $2. Because their teams are hyper focused on getting in some kind of revenue so they can kind of manage the waters until they're coming back on full steam. So it's really on the onus is on the technology and marketing teams to make management understand this is an investment that has a tangible ROI right away. It's not enough to say, yeah, this is a cool fan engagement. The fans will like it. That might work, maybe. I haven't seen it, but it might work during normal times, but it definitely won't work now. So so the strategy is more important, that business case, that ROI. And I mean, the other nice to haves are great decorators, but there has to be solid revenue coming back with it.
And then I would say the fan isn't in the food chain in the same way that they typically have been. You know, anyways.
Actually, I just want to hit on that before we move on, because I think that's a really important point. Is I think like what I'm seeing with COVID-19 is like a new user behavior that's being created out of necessity. And I've never heard the term virtual been used more in my entire life. And I work in AR and VR. And so while there may not be activity because of you know, the lack of time and budget within the sports industry, there are other ancillary industries and industries around the sports industry where there are virtual activities happening. And I think you need to recognize that and understand that when we come out of this, the fan is going to expect a different activity, a different type of engagement, because new behaviors have been formed, and they're going to have a new appreciation and respect for virtual in a way where I feel like we may come out of this understand that virtual isn't a subpar experience to the real real life version. And that's a big takeaway for AR and VR as a whole.
Absolutely.
And one point I want to add is, the last few years have seen, like the sports, I mean, like typically sports has always been a game day, event, right? But outside of the game day, there hasn't, I mean, other than social media content or anything else, right? There hasn't been much interaction between the sports organization and the fans. And in the last few years, I've seen the younger audience having a lot more distractions, right? So now sports as a business is not competing with another team or anything, but they're competing with the other distractions younger audience have. And younger audience have adopted to digital way back, right? I mean, the reason why all those Instagram, Snapchats, and TikToks are popular is because like the adoption rate of the younger audience is huge, and that didn't happen during COVID. That happened way before COVID, right? But sports as an organization, sporting organizations, have, I guess, like probably focus less on non-game day engagement with fans, right? How do you engage them when there are no games, even when there are no seasons, right? How do you think sports as a 24/7, 365-day business, right? So probably like, with the emerging technologies like AR, VR, or primarily AR, right, which is much more cheaper for fans to kind of absorb, might open up those opportunities. And we have not seen that before. That could be the reason why AR hasn't been very popular. Like we have seen kiosks set up in stadiums, which is going to be experience for people who come to the stadium. But what about the fans who have never been to the stadium or who are watching it on the TVs and other things, right? So those are those like, reasons why, in my opinion, it appears that sports hasn't gone or taken AR into mainstream. Probably we might see more post-COVID, right? With like Cherry and Costa and everybody saying that, there is going to be, I mean, I'm sure that digital was always at the lowest priority in the budget list, but now it might move up, and people might be willing to try more and think about a better ROI.
Well, Satish, I might challenge that a little bit. And I think the bad team, the bad organizations are the ones who aren't thinking about their fans the rest of the year outside of game day. I think we have someone on here right now, Scott, whose primary job is to focus on being a 365 days a year of experience. And if you're just thinking about your teams on game day and you're not putting your digital transformation as a priority, I don't think you have a team. I don't think you have an organization. And I think that people are realizing that that is the most important. And I don't think they just realize it now in COVID. I think it's shown the way organizations have transformed themselves. I mean, Scott's is a hugely important role in the organization, and one that maybe I would say 10 years ago didn't exist, and now is one of the most important roles in the organization. So I think teams are embracing that. Again, the smart teams, there may be ones that aren't, but I think when I was at Tennis Canada, it was a 9-day tournament, but we wanted to know, how do we engage people 365 days of the year? And that's the only way you're going to grow as an organization.
Absolutely.
Yeah, one thing to kind of add to that too. I mean, again, going back to when we initially launched AR 3 seasons ago now, when we kind of push these things forward, right? And this is kind of speaking to like the culture change and how it can develop to be something, I guess, more pervasive throughout the organization. But when we started talking about like, hey, we're going to do AR on our game day magazines, everybody's like, okay, and like we talk about these in the meetings, but it was kind of siloed to, a smaller, group that was working this on, the production side, and our creative team and our editorial team that was kind of packaging these things together and thinking like, okay, how can we enhance the value of this product that we're giving to our fans, and actually through storytelling kind of have the covers come to life and create this additional experience for fans. So that was 3 years ago. Fast forward to this year. One of the main reasons that we wanted to expand AR too and take it outside of just the stadium is because we had been getting questions from a ton of other departments in terms of like how they could use AR, right? Like now this is definitely even just the word and what it means to people within the organization, and they've seen it and they've used it, and they're thinking, okay, we have a virtual 5K that we're doing, and we're going to be implementing AR for that 5K, right? Like in a fashion where it can enhance the user's experience and kind of make them feel like they actually got a medal and completed this goal, right? So it's like there's ways then to take it, and like the amount of questions that I've received from other groups, even outside of our own, is fantastic. And I think that just goes to show how AR is growing, how it is becoming more mainstream in sports, and how you're able to use it outside of game day too. There's a ton of applications. I think when I get those questions from other groups, it's really fascinating to talk through. The group's in charge of training camp, the group's in charge of like these other events or virtual draft parties, and ways that we can, enhance that experience. And, the social AR and things that we tried during the draft are all like good examples, but it's now being talked about organization wide, just 3 years later, which is really, really cool to see.
Interesting. Cool. So I think we have an interesting audience question coming in from Robin. Are brands now considering co-investing with rights holders in technologies which would help in increasing fan engagement, of course, with a long-term association? So probably Costa, you might want to take this one?
I think it makes sense. I think they need to look at that with their rights holders, because I think there needs to be a lot more of a partnership with their rights holders. There's a lot of make goods that are going to be due soon after this year. And they really need to invest in those partnerships and create those authentic experiences, because it's no longer a way in which teams can just dictate what they want and then sell that inventory. It doesn't work anymore. You have to work with your partners and your rights holders to create an authentic experience that appeals to what they want to do as well as what you want to do, to really get that value for both parties. Because if you're not getting that value, again, it's no longer an ego play to invest in these sports teams. They actually want that ROI back. They want that brand value. So I think teams, if they aren't already, they need to be doing that.
Interesting. Cool. So I have a question now for Scott and Arvind. AR has been used in sports broadcasting for several years, but sports organizations have not embraced AR in engaging fans directly. So I think the second part of the question is more important. Is cost and lack of understanding preventing a widespread use of this technology among sport organizations? Maybe Arvind, you can go first.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there are like a few different factors, right? Again, we've had comments from Costa, Scott, around the strategy, right? The long-term aspect of it, right? So it's not. This is not something that should be a short-term initiative for a season or something of that sort, right? There's a lot more to it. It has to be a long-term strategy. But certainly, I mean, there is one component from the lack of understanding perspective. Again, technology or tech is not the primary business model as far as the sports organizations are concerned. It's operationally intensive, right? The focus is more on the broadcast rights, sponsorships, right, and ticket sales. And also, like a lot of majority of the organizations, barring the exceptional ones, right, the Vikings or the Niners or the other organizations. So majority of them, they do not have a dedicated team, right? Again, Costa pointed out that Scott's position is very valuable now in today's terms, right? But they don't have a dedicated team, right, to sort of create that digital strategy, right, and the infrastructure and start executing on it. Right, and this has to be a long-term focus as well. Cost is another factor, right, that weighs heavily. So it's expensive because the tech and the approach have always been more of on the big scale, the services scale, right, and there's a lot more human bodies that are involved, right. Democratization has clearly not happened yet. We're moving towards that, right, but it has not happened yet. And also, like time to market is extremely slow. Right. So this is where I think a lot of the companies, 8 Valves of the world, like Blip ARs, even us Fanisco, right, Group Jones, they come into play to sort of help make these emerging tech mainstream. Right. Innovation is a big factor that some of these sports tech organizations are looking at. Right. And if we create a platform that can help the marketing, sponsorships, and partnerships folks, right, to create their own immersive experiences and promote it to their audience base in a timely manner and also in a more cost-efficient way, I think that will open up more widespread usage, right? Even organizations, say from Tier 1, Tier 2, can embrace these emerging tech pretty easily. And there are like several factors that are weighing in right now that's preventing the widespread usage. From my perspective.
Okay, interesting. So Scott, I know you mentioned before that earlier it was perceived as costly, or it wasn't that cheap. But now is it changing? Number one. Number two is that is there more education around it, which is still needed, or it's kind of accepted by people around your community in the sports sector?
Yeah, well, just speak to the education about it. I think, one of the things that, speaking for, from my perspective is like digital leaders in the organization, like you might not necessarily be an expert in AR, right? And know like literally everything that it can do. But like one of the things that I really enjoy about like, when I talk to folks like Tom who like live and breathe this every day, it's really interesting to learn, right? And I think that, we should always continue learning, right? And what's possible. And, with the AR company that we work with, I try to throw out kind of like some initial ideas, right? Like these are general like concepts that we're working on, or something that we think that would be unique, or solve a business need, or engage our fans. And one of my favorite parts of the process is when they come back with all these ideas for things that you can do. And to be completely honest, like a lot of them just like blow my mind, and like what the technology can like is literally capable of each year. I mean, you try to stay up to date on everything in the industry, but I mean, like look at the things that we're tasked with overseeing, right? Like you need to rely on experts in those fields and really establish a good partnership with those folks, where and find a company that's really aligned from the same perspective that you are. And you don't think about it as like a vendor that you're working with, but this is an extension of your organization that can help make you better. I think that it really starts there, and through learning and understanding what the platform and the technology is doing and evolving towards, and using kind of some of the new technologies that come up, whether it's Tom mentioned it, the social or web AR. And I feel like those are all things that we're still scratching the surface there, right? Like, I mean, there's so much that can still be done. And while I think that what we've done, in the AR space, I'm really proud of it to date. I'm not blind to the fact that there's so much more that we can still do. So to be on this panel and say, you're in, for me to say I'm an AR expert, I'd be lying. There's a lot that I've learned along the way, and I think that there's a lot that we all can still learn as we see new things that we can accomplish in this space.
Interesting. So there's just one more comment, Scott. I wanted your opinion on this. Dr. Sudarshan is asking, what kind of measures can be taken for those fans who regularly come to your stadium from an AR perspective, maybe?
Sorry, say that again. I missed the first part of that.
What kind of, or what type of measures can you take for those fans who regularly come to the stadium, or who are regulars?
Oh, in terms of how we build AR experiences for them?
Yep.
Yeah, so to give you a little bit of insight of kind of how we've changed our strategy this year, and everything obviously was on the Concessions Cup. Now there's going to be the same Concessions Cup in US Bank Stadium and some partner locations that are going to unlock some different filters. But then we also wanted to create some opportunities for them to use these AR experiences, and then ultimately bring them into the game day environment, potentially on the video boards and some things like that we're still working through. But again, and I touched on it a little bit earlier, but like the normalcy that fans are kind of craving during a very different time. Right now, they still want to feel like they're affecting the team. They still want to feel like they can, cheer with their friends, and create some of that, sense of community among Vikings fans. So those are some of the things. I don't want to get too into the detail with some of the concepts, because they could still kind of change and all that, and we're still kind of building these things. We're in the thick of it right now. But those are some of the things that we're looking to do, is kind of how we take those experiences that are typically like game day rituals or fan traditions, and how we kind of bring those outside the space in an authentic fashion.
Interesting. Awesome. Thank you, Scott. So Sherry and Costa, next question for you. How do sports organizations see AR? Is it a mere technology or a marketing vehicle? Sherry, you can go first, maybe.
I mean,
Oh, whoever. I mean, take a
Yeah.
pick.
I think the smart organizations and the people who've done their work and they've done their strategy see it as a smart move if again it's presented properly. But if it's presented as just this gimmick, then it'll be looked at as a gimmick. So I mean, if again it goes back to strategy, it's when you're talking about different technologies with sports organizations, it goes back to strategy. It goes back to building a business case. It's not about what strategy is the coolest. Every technology is pretty cool. Especially AR and VR. I mean, look at the stuff that it does. It's definitely cool. It could be gimmicky, but again, it goes back to, do you have the proper business strategy? Technology people need to be business people as much as they need to be technologists. And if you're not getting it put through. So it's working with the experts and other companies, but with internally, you have to be able to demonstrate value and then execute properly. Because if you're not, it's just basic, like in every other department, there's no difference. There's just a few more zeros sometimes at the end and a couple of more terms that people don't understand, but you have to make them understand it. And if you aren't conveying that value, then it's a marketing gimmick. If you are conveying the value and you're executing properly, it's a valuable tool for sports organizations. It's a non-technical answer, but it's how you can convey that.
Carrie?
I could be frozen.
Oh, okay.
You are frozen.
Yeah, but we can still hear you.
Okay, I would just offer, in line with Costa said too, looking at it from the sport business landscape, that I think at the end of the day, along with strategy, it's part of the suite of that conversation of building the relationship with the partners. And so some of the engagement in using this as a way to monetize your partnership or factor in your partnership is something that I've seen or that we've seen in talking to the startups working with the sport properties, using these technologies as a means to probably supplement, not be the strategy itself in terms of the working with the partnership. We talked about Scott's example earlier. So that's how we've seen it layered in that regard, I would suggest. Okay.
Fair enough. Cool. Yep. So next question, I'll start with Tom. I know he's been patiently waiting for a long time. So how do sponsors and brands see AR or any other emerging technology for their brand awareness or measuring attribution for any call to actions?
Yeah, I think I'm going to just repeat a lot of what Costa said about value and ROI. While we've been powering countless brands and agencies with our web AR technology, and we really are seeing that these web AR experiences are moving the needle from an ROI perspective. And so measurement is extremely key. And especially on the web, what's great about the web is that you can use, at least with the 8th Wall platform, your own preferred analytics system to be able to measure that and report on that. But I think at a high level, what brands or any organization are looking for when it comes to augmented reality is reach, engagement, and dwell time, in addition to whatever the call to action might be within the experience. And so that reach, I think, is critical. I think oftentimes when we talk about augmented reality, and especially virtual reality, the executive leadership team may race to the endpoint, which is our eventual wearable future. And so, you think about glasses and you're like, I don't see glasses, so I guess we don't need to worry about AR today. But the fact of the matter is that there's massive opportunity in smartphone, tablet, desktop AR. And guess what? That's where the scale is. That's where the reach is. For web AR in particular with 8th Wall, we have an estimated reach of nearly 3 billion devices. So in terms of being able to take the time and carve out the budget to be able to push out an augmented reality experience, you need to be able to see the value. To see value within the consumer sphere, you need that reach. You need it to be accessible. And then in addition, you need it to be as frictionless as possible, right? And so you need that ability to jump into the experience. And then once they're in the experience, that's really where AR as a reality technology can realize real great achievements in dwell time and engagement, because essentially they're asked to focus on, what is presented in front of them and engage with, and again, this brand new reality. They're taken out of their current reality. They're asked to now participate in this blended reality, this augmented reality, which means that they have to dedicate their attention to what you've provided to them, which increases dwell time, increases engagement, increases recall. And as I mentioned at the top earlier, all of this can be oriented around a funnel that can drive to purchase, drive the user into store. I mean, a good Toronto example for augmented reality with Adidas was created by Jam3 with 8Ball, where you were on the streetcar and you scanned a QR code, and then you used your transit card, and AR brought your transit card to life as a scratch ticket, and that scratch ticket then presented you with a discount and drove you into the Adidas store because you're already on the TTC, so you might as well keep going to Dundas Square. So, they're really, going back to Costa's point around the sports organizations, it's the same for the sponsors and the brands. It needs to be value centric, and the fact that the brands and organizations are asking AR to deliver value is a really healthy and necessary place for this technology, because it means that augmented reality in particular, which is the next wave of computing, is on that path to become what it's destined to be.
Interesting. Yep. Agree. Okay, I think if nobody has a point to add there, we could go to the next question. Costa and Scott, how easy or difficult was it for you to convince your team management about the benefits of implementing an AR solution, or for that matter, any new emerging technologies, AR, AI, gamification, analytics, etc., for your fans and audience? What were some of the challenges or change management issues while doing so with your management?
Yeah, I guess I can start. I mean, I think it's an organizational priority, right, with the Vikings to, to test out some of these technologies and kind of not be afraid of, failure or, not having it right out of the gate. There's, I mentioned, like, the first 2 years that we did this, it wasn't, sponsored, but I think the initial value for us, at the Vikings, and one of the things that we talked about was, okay, let's build the data over a couple of years with this, right? And like ultimately, like, yeah, we can monetize it, but one of the initial things that we were discussing was really the app at US Bank Stadium. And one of the things that we've talked about, and now I'm getting into app strategy a little bit, but we have digital ticketing. There's content and push notifications, and our Vikings rewards login is built into the app too. So that's how we've been able to generate some really robust fan profiles and really understand our fans and who's at the game. We're at 99% digital ticketing, and we have been for a couple of seasons now. Really outside of tickets that we give to opposing teams coming in, or some folks on staff or coaches that don't want to deal with digital tickets, we'd be at 100%. That's really valuable to us, right? But we knew that that's where we wanted to go. Yep. And so from my perspective, for us, we didn't really care necessarily like what fans used on game day, whether it was like in-seat delivery of beverages, whether it's like wayfinding, whether they love the digital ticketing, whether they can buy parking through the app to enhance their experience, whether they're just coming there for content, or whether we can deliver the right notifications for the content that they find most valuable on the app. To be completely honest, we didn't care, right? Like, we just wanted something in the app that helped the fan with their part of the journey. Yep. And so when we looked at it and like how that idea was kind of born, I was like, wait, we put game day magazines on literally like every seat in the stadium. I was like, this is an opportunity for us to bring these to life. Like, why are we just putting these on seats if we're not doing like, some more with them? Yep. And so then we started talking about like, editorial, and there's, I oversee that group too. And so the writers do these, fantastic feature pieces, and it's usually on like one player who's on the cover. And so if it's about like Adam Thielen, one of our wide receivers, and his rise from, somebody who wasn't, very highly recruited, and then he's a, undrafted free agent and works his way onto the practice squad. Now he's one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. Let's tell a story through augmented reality. So it literally looks like, Adam Thielen's on the cover, and you scan it and he comes to life. And there's ways that you can kind of tap and go through, photos of him growing up, and you're learning kind of some facts about Adam Thielen as you go. To me, that's a much more engaging experience, right? So even if that we didn't have like, this playbook AR activation sponsored to you by Pepsi, right? Like, we didn't have that in the app, but the amount of people, I think we had, I think it was around, this is like 3 years old now, 60% of the people who scanned that activation were brand new to the app. So they downloaded the app to do that. So that's a win for us, even though, so that's a way to kind of achieve those business objectives without necessarily having to have a brand or a sponsor tied to the activation as well.
So just very quickly before I move to Costa, Scott, there's a question by Bettina from the audience. Is there a ballpark dollar figure for the tech investment, and how long does it take for the ROI part? I mean, any of you could answer, either you or—
Tell us your budget, Scott.
Yeah, let's open the books. Like as you get started, I think you can go and, like Tom can kind of speak to this too, but there's a wide range of, for different experiences that you can build out and kind of how complicated that you want to get. And, there is one AR activation that I was really, really excited about this year. And one of the things that we really wanted to try with the company that we work with, and we're probably not going to be able to do that because of budget, right? It was kind of on like the higher end. I think that there's some real long-term value in the concept that we had created, and ways that we could build on that year over year over year, and really bring some cool things to life for fans. But being realistic, like, sports teams are different. Casa alluded to it in terms of just the amount of revenue that's kind of tied to it. And, sports teams are, family-owned businesses, right? Like, so even though they're these huge, like global brands, they're, we're a lot smaller than what people might think on the outside, kind of looking in. So we have to find out what makes, the most sense for us. Just like anything in terms of like where to spend dollars, and that one piece that's going to eat at me for a long time. And, we're still kind of trying to figure out if we can do that. I never truly take no for an answer. But I think that there's some different ways that you can get creative. We kind of went the most complicated route with an SDK inside in the app. But there are some other ways, that Tom alluded to, that you can, kind of get started with AR in a little bit, maybe more of a cost-effective manner too.
Awesome. Costa?
I
sorry,
just
Terry,
wanted to add, because I know we're coming to the end of the time. As a colleague, Bettina, just so you all know, because I like to support strong women, is one of the world's leading sports sponsorship thought leaders and scholars. So I appreciate her being on the call, and I would love to get her perspectives for us next time we do this.
Lovely. Yep. So
Yeah,
Costa.
I think if we go back to budgets, I mean, it all depends. And I think Scott makes a great point. Everyone thinks, oh, we got unlimited budgets. They see all the money the players get. Well, the money goes to the product, which is the players. That's who brings in the revenue.
Well said.
Yep. In the back office, it's a lot different.
Yes.
But I think, again, if you go back to, you have to be able to kind of create the budget. You have to be able to justify. So, I mean, different teams will have different budgets, but it's what can you justify? What can you get an ROI for? What can you demonstrate value? It's the responsibility, and it's the new technology leadership. Technology, the servers and network, that's a commodity that can be outsourced. That can be done very cheaply now in the cloud. It's, as a technology leader, what are you bringing that helps grow the organization, that helps grow sponsorship, gate revenues, even high performance? And that's how you're going to justify your budgets, really. So again, it goes back to technology leaders being true business leaders, versus just programmers or network engineers. And I think that's how you have to look at it, and that's how you get your budget created. And that's how you get bigger budgets to do cooler activations and a lot more fun stuff that helps grow the organization.
And I think just like one thing to add to factor into all this is that like mobile augmented reality in particular has matured to a point where you're not creating things from scratch, right? You have platforms that you're able to tap into, which allow for meaningful, interactive, augmented reality experiences to be created at a much different budget than 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. So anything from the social AR platforms to our web AR platform to the native application platforms like ARKit and ARCore. I mean, all of these have really matured to the point where it is making it possible to have solutions not just at a budget that you can justify ROI, but also scale. In addition, as Costa mentioned, the cloud has matured, the smartphone camera has changed, battery life is different. And so you have to take a look at the entire tech, stack and the ecosystem and ask yourself, whether or not the ingredients are ripe enough to pluck the fruit. And the answer for mobile AR is hell yes.
Yeah, I want to add one quick point on that. 5 years back, when we were building mobile apps for the Indian market, when there was no 3G or no smartphone, better phones, right? We were thinking about the size of the app download and things like that, right? But guess what? Within 12 months or 18 months, right? Things have evolved, and people were having high-end smartphones, and 3G came out, and the phone's data network got low. So again, it's kind of like the Murphy's Law, right? Within 18 months, the chip sizes get reduced. So technology is going to evolve faster. So innovation has to catch up, right? So every year, Google and Apple are going to improve their platforms and come up with new capabilities, more power, likewise with the web and everything. So innovation has to catch up, and fans' behavior also changes because they're getting spoiled by the other experiences. So unless the experience that you're providing doesn't match up to that, you have a drop off. So it's all the more fun as technology evolves. It's a challenge for the companies to keep up with it and innovating.
Yes, awesome. I think, guys, we are pretty much over time now. So yeah, thank you, everybody. And thank you to all the wonderful audience here. Some really good questions from all of you. And thank you, panelists. We had a great time discussing this topic. And yep, if there's any question which is unanswered, we will definitely get back to you on email, and we will be launching a short survey once again. Thank you once again for your time. And have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.